Hey, praise the Lord. I just want to say thank you all once again for your faithfulness, for joining us on these Tuesday nights. I think it says a lot about you and about your commitment to growing. We have been on a great journey as it relates to what God is doing, what God has been saying to us. And once again, I just want to say thank you so much for your diligence. It means a lot. And I tell you, one of the things that greatly does my heart good is as we're having these conversations and you can actually tangibly recognize the growth in your own spiritual life. Now, customarily what we do is every week we recap and we highlight what it was we discussed the week prior. And so last week we discussed tapping into a higher system, right? We talked about Jesus sharing the parable of the sower to the multitude, right? But he was telling his disciples and those who were connected to him that he wasn't going to give it to them parabolically. He was going to give them an understanding of the mystery. And so, long story short, what we saw from that was he said that, it's not for you to be in a position where you're trying to figure everything out. You're trying to guess everything. But to you, I'm going to give some clarity on how it is that you are supposed to be navigating life. And we also discussed that that higher system was God. And so one of the things that we got from last week is that one of the things that commonly gets us off track is that we get in this place where we're comparing systems. And what I mean by comparing systems is that if we're not liking what God is doing, then what we do is we have a tendency to lean into the previous system. Now, when God confronts the system of oppression as it related to Egypt, what he was doing was he was showing the weakness of that system by simultaneously bankrupting that system. And so we saw that because Moses and them, they were tapped into God. What did Moses say? He said, I don't want anything. I don't want this promised land if it is absence of your presence. And so he understood the necessity of being locked into God. And so we paired that up with what Jesus was saying about the mystery. I understand that there's something greater than what it is that I've been putting my confidence into. And now I'm hearing it with greater clarity. And now I know how to govern my life. Now, the thing about the mystery and tapping in to a higher system, we said last week that proximity does not equal receptivity. You can be around the truth while at the same time rejecting it. Proximity does not equal receptivity. The word says from the Beatitudes, it says that they that hunger and thirst for righteousness shall be filled. Now, the thing is, if you have no appetite for it, the expectation should not be that God will give it to you, because God, he allows us to operate in this thing called free will. So the reality is that if you are not operating in it, it's because somewhere down the line you made a choice as it related to what it was that you wanted from God. The reality is that we live in a time when we can't allow confusion to be the primary thing that's driving us. Confusion shouldn't even be in the equation. And the way that we get above confusion is to tap into what God is saying, because once again, because of our connection to him, we understand that he will make the mysteries made known unto us. Now, in keeping in line with what we've been talking about as it related to when we entered into this year, we've been talking about being in sync with God. And I want to talk tonight about a subject that I don't think we give a lot of attention to. And so I'm not going to do a lot of reading tonight. Our base scripture is going to really cover where we're going today and potentially next week. But tonight, if you would turn with me to Luke chapter 2, verse 41, and we're going to read down to verse 52. And once again, thank you all for your patience and your diligence tonight. Luke chapter 2, reading verse 41 down to 52. All right. Luke 2, starting at 41, it says, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem according to the custom of the feast. When they had finished the days as they returned, the boy Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem, and Joseph and his mother did not know it. But supposing him to have been in the company, they went a day's journey and sought him among their relatives and acquaintances. So when they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem seeking him. Now it was that after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought you anxiously. And he said to them, why did you seek me? Did you not know that I must be about my father's business? But they did not understand the statement which he had spoke to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject to them. I want you to hear that. And was subject to them. But his mother kept all these things in her heart. And here's the other thing that I want to highlight to you right now. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with men. Tonight, we're going to talk about managing the quiet seasons. Managing the quiet seasons. On Thursdays, we have our discipleship group. And one of the things that I've shared in that setting is that when we read the Bible, what we have is we have the benefit of looking at the lives of people who had an encounter with God. And we get to see not only the beginning of that encounter, but we get to see how that encounter ultimately impacted them throughout the course of their remaining days. Whether they made the right decision or they made the wrong decision, ultimately what we have the benefit of is we see the consistency of God and how he interacts with humanity when we're put in these various situations. One of the things that I haven't really heard discussed is what is the expectation of God towards us when we find ourselves in these quiet seasons. Ecclesiastes, if you're taking notes, Ecclesiastes 3:1, it says, to everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, which means that there's a response associated with every season of life. There's something that we should be doing. Even with that being said, we all have to identify the season of life that we're in. We are not all in the same season. Some of us are what we're talking about tonight. We're in that quiet season. Some of us are in the building season. Some of us are even in a transitional season. Whatever season that you're in, it is important that we understand what it is we're supposed to be doing, but not only what it is we're supposed to be doing, in understanding the season, that's how we're able to shape our priorities. I want to read something to you really quick. This is from Matthew 11, 7. I'm going to read verse 17 through 19. You don't have to turn there, but I would like for you to annotate this if you are taking notes. This is Matthew 11, verse 17 through 19, and it says, and saying, we played the flute for you, and you did not dance. We mourned to you, and you did not lament. For John came neither eating nor drinking, and they say he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, look, a glutton, a winebibber, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is justified by her children. What this verse is telling us is that we see a group of people who did not have the correct response to the season that they were in. And as a result, they couldn't recognize what God was doing. What Jesus was saying is that we did all of these things, but your response was not consistent with the time. And once again, it's imperative for us to understand the seasons that God has us in. When we are not in sync with God, we run the risk of mistaking the season. And I'm going to keep beating this over the head. This coming into this year, especially, is necessary for us to be in sync with God. The quiet season, what we're talking about tonight, is the time between when you give God a yes, and that's what it seems like a silence from God before you start. Uh, we see this all throughout the Bible. I'm gonna be 100% honest with you. You know, when you look at Abraham went through a quiet season before the promise of Isaac, his son, came. You know, he went years before Isaac showed up on the scene, but that was a quiet season. Moses went through a quiet season before he would go back into Egypt to lead God's people. He was in the what did it say? He was in the wilderness for 40 years, a quiet season. And all he was doing was leading his father-in-law's sheep. You don't see the interaction with God until he has this burning bush encounter. And so the question is, what do you do in those quiet seasons? David went through a quiet season before he became king. He was anointed as a child, but it wasn't until he was I believe in his late 20s, maybe even 30, before he took on the title officially and was walking in that kingly mandate that God had given him. Paul, the same thing. Paul went through a quiet season before he understood the ministry that God had gave him. And as we see here, Jesus himself went through a quiet season before he began to realize the assignment that he had been given to accomplish. So here we have the person which our faith is built upon, confronted with the reality that he has a work to do. He knows he has a work to do, but he's trying to do something out of season. Jesus Christ himself knew he had a work to do, but he was trying to do something out of season. Right assignment, wrong time. I need you to hear that. Right assignment, wrong time. Now, I want to give you a little breakdown on this. By Jewish law, I believe this is somewhere in the book of Numbers. Jesus wasn't old enough to be appointed to the office that he was trying to walk in. I think you had to be 30 in order to be considered to be a priest. And so what God wanted to do through Jesus, it ultimately would have been discredited if Jesus would have been dogmatic about trying to do something outside of the timing. Okay. Now, let's be honest. I'm guilty of this, guilty as charged. There are some times where I just try to force the issue. You know what I'm saying? I know that God called me to do something. I know that, God is opening up these doors and that the favor is there. And, but here's the danger in doing that. Anything that you do of your own strength, you are now responsible for the results. Anything that you do of your own strength and in your own timing, you now become responsible for the maintenance of that thing. Now, we've talked about this on a number of occasions. If we are made in the image and likeness of God, we know that God is the creator, which means that we have the ability to create. If God is our sustainer, whatever it is that we create, we are now responsible, once again, for the maintenance of that thing, which is the danger in trying to do something out of its season. Now, I want you to write this down. This is not cliches, but I know that we've heard this on a number of occasions, and that is not every good thing is a God thing. Now, I talked about Abraham in his quiet season, and I want you to read Genesis 21 in your own time. But what happened in Genesis prior to Genesis 21, Abraham got ahead of God in his quiet season, and as a result, he had an illegitimate child with the handmaid of his wife. The child Ishmael, which was the illegitimate child, he ends up tormenting Isaac, which was the son of promise. Okay. And what we see in this story is the mistake is overshadowing the promise. The mistake is overshadowing the promise. So it says that he was bullying his little brother. And so Abraham was now responsible for an act that he completed in his flesh as one that he should have realized through his faith. Okay. And so we're still talking about understanding the quiet season. The quiet season is a time of preparation. And I need you to get this. Okay. The expectation is that we grow until God announces the shift. The quiet season is a time of preparation, and the expectation is that you grow until God announces the shift. And that's what we see with Jesus. It says that he grew in wisdom and stature. Every season of your life there's an announcement for the next season prior to you coming into it. And I need, from a spiritual standpoint, I need you to understand this. There's an announcement for the next season of your life. The issue is that God will show us a thing, and we get it, him showing us the thing is for us to get started. Because the reality is, for a lot of us, the hardest thing for us to do is say yes. Because we're factoring in, once again, we're aware of our inadequacies. We know our own backstory. And so we're struggling and saying, hey, God, why would you choose me? I'm just a sinner undone. And, for all of these reasons, we find out, we try to justify why we can't do it. And so God will show you a thing just to get you excited. And then in the quiet season, he gets quiet. But the thing is, we're so focused on the thing that he showed us that, we don't settle ourselves long enough to be prepared for where it is that we're going. But if you think about Abraham, there was a time of preparation. He led his household, before God would do all of the things that he did. He's our model and our example of faith, but he had to develop and he had to grow into being that person. The thing about David, when he ultimately became the king, one of the things that we overlook is that he also led a band of discontented people, is what the word says. I believe that's in 1 Samuel around the 20th chapter. It talks about how the worst of the country came to David when he was hiding in a cave. The reality is that he had to learn to go to be ultimately what it was that he was becoming. The same thing with pretty much everybody in the Bible. Once again, Moses leading his father-in-law's sheep before he comes back and now leads a people. There's a season of preparation. And once again, what we see with Jesus Christ was he had to grow in stature, in wisdom, to walk in the revelation that God was imparting upon him as it related to his responsibility here in this world. One of the things that trips us up is that things aren't, because we don't think things are happening fast enough and we can't gauge our growth. We don't think that anything is happening. The season of preparation can be a long one or it can be a short one, but it is the most necessary season for any of us, because ultimately it is setting you up for where God is going to have you focus the majority of your effort on. But we're familiar with the foundation of a house. A mislaid foundation causes greater damage than anything that you can imagine. Everything that you build upon a mislaid foundation has the potential of being destroyed. And that's why this quiet season is necessary. I know that we have some business owners on here. I know that we have people who God is calling to a new work and all of that. The reality, whether it be ministry, whether it be a job, it can even be relationships. The thing that you are desiring has to come with a season of preparation. And the question, once again, is how do we manage the seasons where it doesn't feel like God is speaking to me? The temptation, once again, is that we try prematurely to do things. When you look at the temptation of Jesus Christ, and I'm getting ready to close, the temptation of Jesus Christ, this is literally right before Jesus is getting ready to start his work. He's 12 years old. We see here in the text, in the book, the Bible doesn't really say much about him up until he's 30 years old. So the question was, what happened in this quiet season of 18 years? From all intents and purposes, from what we understand, was he settled in the work of his family's trade as a carpenter, and that he was a model man doing the best that he can. I believe the scripts implied that by this time his father Joseph had died, and so he is literally the man of the house, and now he's shifting and transitioning into ultimately his God-given purpose and destiny. The thing in which the Father necessitated for him being here on earth. And so the announcement of the new season came when John the Baptist said, hey, behold the Lamb of God. And more specifically, when God says, this is my, my beloved son, and we know that the angel descends upon him and now he's led into the wilderness. And the wilderness experience was meant to try what took place in this quiet season of preparation. And this is where a lot of us miss it. We failed the test prior to the release into what the preparation was for. And I hope that makes sense. It's almost like a cumulative exam. We've been going to school. We've been taking all of these notes. We've been doing all of these courses. And this is the setup for the next transition. And then this is where we miss it. Jesus Christ being tempted. And here's the thing. Satan was trying to force him into a position out of season, a position that came with no sacrifice. And once again, if we are not careful in our quiet season, in our season of preparation, we'll desire the thing more than what God made necessary for us to be able to maintain and sustain in that place when he puts us there. There's a reason why, and I know you all have heard the stories about millionaires, people who've won the lottery, and how they've lost millions within a matter of months, years of getting that. And the reason is that there was no preparation that taught them how to sustain the money. And so as a result, they lost it because there was no quiet season of understanding. How do I invest? What do I hold? What should I put my money in? What's a foolish, does it make sense for me to buy all of this? And, I don't understand appreciating and depreciating assets. And so as a result, I lost everything. Be a good steward in the season that God has you in, because it's a setup for where God has you going. And once again, we're talking about being in sync with God. We have to understand the seasons that God has us in. Once again, Ecclesiastes says to everything, there's a season. Excuse me, I don't want to misquote that. I think I wrote it down somewhere. It says, to everything there's a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. What is the season of life that God has you in? As you understand your season, you will now understand how to prioritize. And this is a part about being in sync with God. And so once again, today we hit on the quiet season, because we all experience a quiet season when we develop the courage to step out on faith. And now it don't seem like God is talking as much as he was about that thing. The reality is, what you do is you stay consistent with what it is that you're doing. You grow, and then you wait on the announcement to make the next move. And so, with that being said, we're pretty much at our time limit. We're going to open up the floor for questions and comments. And I just want to say thank you for once again taking your time on this evening to join us. All right, so the floor is open, you all.